My name is Roger Lê. I'm with the Vietnamese American Heritage Foundation. Today is July 23rd, 2010. We are here at SBTN, Washington, D.C. I'm interviewing Trinh, a Vietnamese Australian lawyer. So Trinh, could you tell me where you were born?
Okay. Hello, everyone. I can tell you where I was born. I was born in Saigon in 1970, and that's it. Yeah.
What were your parents' names and what kind of occupations did they have?
My dad's name is Trinh. So, the English way is Trinh. And my mom's name is Trương Mỹ Ngọc. So, Ngọc Mỹ Trương. And what did they do in Vietnam?
Yes.
They were both teachers. But dad was in the Reserve Army as an officer as well, so he was both an officer and a teacher. Yeah, before 75.
Could you name some parts of your life where some fond memories of growing up as a child?
Fond memories. Well, fond memories for me, but I don't know if it's fond memories for others. I remember, I was born in 1970, so don't really have any memories of pre-75 stuff because I was, under 5. But after 75, I think one of my first trip and long trip in Vietnam was to go and visit my dad in re-education camp. It was in Cà Mau, which is like, the southern tip of Vietnam. And so mom took me and I think my sister down there, and it was like 6 years old, and it took like 3 days to go down there. It was fantastic, it was the first time that I got to get out of the house and see the countryside because we're from the city, and it was fun to see my dad in prison. But yeah, it was fun. Another one would be, dad was in re-education camp for 3 years, so in 77 he was released, but then we were not allowed to live in Saigon, so we were, moved to a new economic zone, which is a form of persecution given out to South Vietnamese families that had something to do with the past. So we were sent out to Phu Quoc Island, which is a remote island off the coast of southern Vietnam, and I don't know. I mean, now I look back, it meant to be hard, but those were my fond memories because it's the first time that, as a city boy, I was 7 years old, going out to Phu Quoc Island and hanging out on the beach, and then working on the farm, and I don't know, riding buffaloes and carrying water from the well, which is completely different from city life. And no electricity, and going fishing. So it meant to be hard, but it was fun memory of my time in Vietnam. Yeah.
Do you remember going to school like in elementary or?
Yeah. I mean, so when we moved to Phu Quoc, I was in year 1, 77, so second year. Yeah, year 2. I can't remember. Like, it's primary school. It's like a village school. Can't remember I studied anything other than like hanging out with the village kids and running around and helping mom and dad with stuff around the farm, because they were pretty bad farmers because they were teachers. So they couldn't really cultivate the land, but we had to make do. So, but it was fun in the sense that, like, I remember, like, there was no electricity, so we always had to use these oil lamps, and from being a middle class rich family in Saigon, we were banished to this brazen land where we lived in a hut with it's a straw huts with they use tree barks as the wall as well as the ceiling. So I remember, like, as you lie back at night, you can look out into the garden, because you can see these little holes in between the tree barks. So so that's what I remember of my schooling years, because I was hanging out there a lot. And then On the beach, they were fond memories because in '79, Dad escaped from Vietnam, and so he left back 4 of us with my mom on the island, and then to help out with the family, I started going selling watermelon seeds. I don't know. I mean, watermelon seeds is it's just a specialty in Vietnam, especially at night. So then we would go out on the beach, me and my sister, and selling these little packets of watermelon seeds on the beach, and it was fun. As a kid, you don't want to be stuck at home, right? So it's mom was a teacher, but her teacher income was so bad. So, and Dad, we didn't know where he was. I mean, in fact, he was in Thailand. Then later on, he was resettled in Australia. But at the time, for about a whole year, we didn't know where he was. So, it was fun at night to be able to go out on the beach and then sell all those watermelon seeds, and then after that, playing with the other kids on the beach. So those are great memories. What else do I remember? And then there was one time I remember the whole family tried to escape from Vietnam, but
How did that occur?
well, we tried so many times. We tried so many times, but it all failed because Mum and Dad were trusting the people there, but they took Mum's and Dad's money, so they always ran out of money, and they couldn't see any boats. But there was one time when the family was split, so Mom stayed back with the 2 sisters, and then Dad took me and another sister, and the only boy in the family with him. The decision was made was because then if we got caught, then some family members would still be out to support us. So that was the rationale. So then one of the occasions he didn't get arrested, but my sister and I got arrested. And so we were detained for about 3 months in prison. And looking back, I mean, it was. I look back with fond memories because I remember, like, for the first time in my life, no one told me when to go to sleep. Like, no one told me when to get up, and I was too young. I was like 8 years old, so didn't have to go to school, which was fantastic.
8-year-old in prison.
Yeah, but I mean, like, it was fun. Okay, I mean, now I look back, and maybe because I don't look back with such sad stories. I mean, they were all sad stories, but I think as a kid, if I have to be honest with myself, I'm not angry at all. I'm not like, hey, I went through such a hard time. As a kid, that's what and I just remember those fun times when I didn't. I wasn't exactly confined to a little room as you think a prison is. I mean, it was like a huge hall, and everyone was there. But as a young kid, no one really cares what you do. So then you can run around, and the security guards ask you to go and buy him some cigarettes, and so I would go and do that, and so yeah. So.
Could you explain more in detail how you felt when you and your sister were captured and brought to
we were scared because what happened was a lot of Vietnamese tried to escape Vietnam at the time, especially families like my family, because Dad wasn't allowed to be a teacher. He was an officer. He was a headmaster in Saigon, but after '75, he went to prison, and after that, he wasn't allowed to teach again. And then so he had to work as like a laborer at a harbor. So that wasn't very easy on him. So he tried to escape from Vietnam. But then it wasn't also easy because the government tried to, arrest you and detain you and shoot you and whatnot. So it was, every time you go, it was like a real secret operation, like Mom and Dad would tell us where we were going. They would just say, come with us. And I remember I used to be like quite pissed off because I'm like, oh, my life is fine, like why are we leaving? Why are we going? Because I mean, as a 5 or 6 or 7-year-old kid, you don't really know what happened. Didn't know why Vietnam was changed in '75, etc., etc. So when that time Dad took me and my sister out, I was really pissed off. I remember. I'm like, why do we have to go again? Why can I not talk as like you have to all be really secretive about it and like walk for like a whole night through forests and dams, and I don't know. It's I can vividly remember how tough it was, the trip, because we basically had to walk from one province to another, from one end of the island to another island where the boat was supposed to wait for us. So it's a whole night, and then because we were kids, we were told to go off first, and then my dad, I remember, had to carry some petrol, so he was lagging behind. So in the morning, we were just waiting on the beach for the boat to come, but the boat never came. Instead, the police came, and so we were just waiting on the beach, and they were saying like, "All of you, stand up and hands up," and I remember saying, "Oh shit, hands up!" And so there you go. We got arrested. But as a kid, what do you know? You don't really know anything. You just have to. You kind of like go on with the flow, which is fantastic. It's so fantastic. I didn't have to experience it when I was 20 or something. I was 8. So it's fantastic that now I look back and think, wow, I was in prison, but it wasn't that tough. It was, yeah. And I remember like every prisoner can only have 2 bowls of rice per day, and and at the time I think there wasn't enough rice in Vietnam, so they used this thing called bò bò, which is like, I don't know what the English word is, but it's like, what is it, man? It's not even like cassava. It's just bad carb, and you can't really eat it. It's supposed to be for animals, for horses or pigs or whatnot, because Vietnam was going through a slight famine at the time, so we had to eat this bò bò, and as a kid you can't really finish the whole bowl, which is really full. So I remember like every lunch, behind me there will be like 5 guys lining up behind me just so that I can give them some bò bò, and I felt really powerful, like, wow, people are just waiting for me, because I couldn't finish it, right? I was only 8, so yeah, it was fun for 3 months.
So when you did escape, how long ago was that?
Well, we didn't escape. So Dad was on the sea for 10 days, and then he got rescued by a Thai boat, and then he was in Thailand for 3 months, and then he was resettled in Australia because he was an English teacher before 75. So then he got skills, so then he was resettled within 3 months instead of waiting for a year or 2 years at the height of the boat people exodus. So he went to Australia in 1980, and 5 years later he sponsored my mom, my 3 sisters and I over at the end of 84, start of 85. So that's how I went to Australia.
How old were you then?
I was 14.
Did you go to junior high in Australia? What kind of?
What's junior high? Just high school, right?
High school.
Year 8. So I was 14 years old. So I went to Australia, and I went right into high school, year 8, on my like 3rd day in Australia.
Could you describe going to school there compared to Vietnam?
Wow. Oh man, everything was different. It's like, I couldn't speak English, right? So I remember the first time we went to school, I didn't understand what everyone was saying. It's like, what? So that was tough. But then again, when you're 14 years old, what you try to do is you try to fit in. So you don't sit there and you think, oh, why do I have to study English? You have to, in order to assimilate and to get in, because you really, really want to assimilate. So it was fun. It was fun, sort of like for the first 2 years, we had to do English as well as ESL, which is English as a second language, given to all these refugee and immigrant kids from, not just Vietnam, but Cambodia, Laos, Iran. Australia is a multicultural society. So for the first 2 years, everyone was required to go to a normal school so that they can assimilate, but at the same time, they have to take extra classes like ESL. So instead of like other kids, they would only do 4 hours of English. We would have to do like 16 hours of English or something, on top of other, stuff, which was great, in hindsight. Although at the time you got really sick of it because like you go to English classes all the time. But yeah, but after about, I can't quite remember for the first 2 years because a lot of it happened at school that I didn't really understand, not just language-wise, but like culturally speaking. In Vietnam, boy and girl relationship is like a no, especially when you're only year 7, year 8. And I remember I was like flabbergasted when I first saw kids kissing each other, in the backyard, or during recession or recess or at lunchtime, and I was thinking, wow, they're really daring, aren't they? So it was fun. I look back with just so many fond memories, especially the fact that from a homogenic background like the Vietnamese, we only had Vietnamese in Vietnam, no one else. And then suddenly, I remember I went to Brunswick High School in Melbourne, Australia, where you have 30, 40 nationalities, ethnicities mingled together. So we started having Cambodian friends, Lebanese, that's right, there were a lot of Lebanese at the time, Turks and Italians, and then, Australians. So yeah, it was fun.
So, where did you go to college then, or university?
I went to first Melbourne University, and I did a double degree there. I did laws and arts.
What inspired you to go there?
I got the marks. No, not really. Well, I always wanted to, have always been in my life a bit of an extrovert, kind of like, not too shy, a bit talkative, so a bit opinionated. So then law was, for Vietnamese parents, you have to go to university. You have no choice but to go. I mean, that's not, it's not even an option. Okay, so don't talk about going into like a dancing class or like painting or shit. You have to go to college. You have to go to university. So then going to university, it's not as if like you can do whatever you want. With my parents, you can only do certain things, either engineering or doctor, lawyer, dentistry, commerce, the very mundane, top of the class kind of thing, right? And out of all those fields, I think law was the one that I loved the most. I think I loved journalism just as much, but either I didn't have the confidence going for it, or the fact that because I got enough marks, because in Australia, to go to these courses, you need to do it well at school. So, yeah. So then I wouldn't do medicine. I didn't want to do dentistry. So I picked law and I got in. Yeah.
So what did you do after you graduated from the university?
Well, what did I do? In Australia, if you want to sort of like, well, if you kind of like want to travel and you want to do stuff, then as soon as you finish 3rd year, 4th year, we had to do 5 years of law, and you have to do something called a summer internship, just so that it can increase your chance of being employed when you graduate. So then I started working as a paralegal, as a summer intern for a big law firm in Australia. And then in summer 1992, I got a chance to go to work in Hong Kong in, at the time, the biggest refugee camps holding Vietnamese refugees in the early 90s. This is 1992 when there were about 100,000 Vietnamese refugees in Hong Kong. So there was a group called Australian Lawyers for Refugees Inc. They were looking for a Vietnamese-speaking paralegal to go to Hong Kong to work for 3 months as a volunteer for a human rights lawyer called Pam Baker. So of course, with me, sort of like wanting to travel the world and see something beyond Melbourne. Of course, I gave up my summer clerkship at this law firm and I went straight to Hong Kong. So I loved it, absolutely loved it, fell in love with it. So for 4 consecutive summers after that, so 92, 93, 94, 95, as soon as I finished my exams, I went off to Hong Kong. So then, yeah, that's what I did.
So what kind of status did those refugees have in Hong Kong?
They, just like other refugees, they had no status. I mean, they had no refugee status because, in a nutshell, from 1975 to 1979, there was an exodus of Vietnamese boat people, but there was no agreement. So then everyone was doing it at an ad hoc basis. So in 1979, the international community got together in Geneva and they agreed that if the asylum countries such as the Philippines, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Indonesia wanted to take these people in, then the resettlement countries of the US, Australia, Canada, and the West will take them. This was part of the Cold War plan and the guilds from the Vietnam War. These people were persecuted by the communists and whatnot. So, and that agreement stood for 10 years. Then in 1989, and they got together again in Geneva, and this time they said, "No, it's going on for too long. Vietnam is no longer that bad." So then they will have to set up a screening process. Anyone who arrives before 89 would be given automatic refugee status. So my dad didn't have to go through that process, together with like nearly 1 million people, I think. So hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese boat people didn't have to go through that process, and they got resettled. After 1989, everyone had to go through that process, and that process is called like a refugee status determination process under the auspices of the UNHCR, using the UN Refugee Convention of 1951 to process them. So anyone who arrives at a camp in Hong Kong or Malaysia, Indonesia, would be given temporary residence. No, it wouldn't be resident. It's a temporary status while your your status is being determined. Now, if you're a refugee, then you would be given resettlement in the West. If you're not, then you have to go back to Vietnam. So yeah, the status was de facto stateless, legally speaking.
You could have worked in the private practice and rode off into the sunset and made a lot more money, but what inspired you to help refugees instead?
Well, there were a number of factors. I don't want to sound like a do-gooder, because I think at the end of the day, everyone does it because it's got to come from the heart. Otherwise, you just can't go on forever. First of all, it's because I really loved the work. I remember the first time I went to Hong Kong and I was, 21? And seeing thousands and thousands of Vietnamese being detained in these detention centers, not even refugee camp. You've got to recognize the difference between a refugee camp and a detention center. A detention center is like a prison, and it was built for prisoners, not for refugees. But Hong Kong, due to its lack of space and lack of compassion, would detain tens of thousands of people in these detention centers. Bare concrete, barbed wire, no shades, no garden, nothing of that sort. Everyone would be crammed onto a little bunk bed, just the size of this table. And that's for your whole family, 4 of you on this. And that's your living room, your bedroom, your kitchen, you name it. And it's not just one bunk bed, it's a three bunk beds on top of one another. So it was really cramped. And I remember the first time I went to Hong Kong, and every Monday morning they would be searched for weapons or sugar, or because they're not allowed to possess anything, including sugar. Then everyone was made to sit on the floor for hours, waiting for these security guards to search the entire hut. And every hut would, house about 1,000 people, and there'll be like 20 huts, so you're talking about 20,000 people right out in that field. And because I was a foreigner, I was an Australian at the time, I was segregated. I mean, I was one of the expat volunteers going in, helping, people. So I remember I was standing there looking at thousands and thousands of people in front of my eyes and thinking, wow, what's the difference? What really is the difference between me and them? Well, not much, just a stroke of luck. Dad left early, and I got lucky. So that's kind of like the overriding theme that always played in my mind, that I was really fortunate to be given an opportunity when I was young enough to get an education in the West, and then to see other Vietnamese not so lucky. So that was sort of part of the reason why I found it interesting. The woman I was working with was an amazing lawyer. She was an Irish, she was a Scottish grandmother. She was 70 years old at the time. And I was like the youngest kid in the group. There were about between 10 to 20 lawyers working in her law firm. It's the only non-profit law firm in Hong Kong helping Vietnamese refugees. And I felt privileged that I was among those people. I was learning a lot. I was only 21 years old, training to be a lawyer. It was so much fun because there were lawyers from like England and the US and Australia. And at the time I was still kind of a bit Vietnamese, Vietnamese in my thinking, because I was in Vietnam until the age of 14, and then I had only about 7 or 8 years in Australia. And it's my first time leaving my family and living with someone else, so learning a lot. So then when I finished law, and then when I worked as a corporate lawyer in Sydney for Baker McKenzie, which is this huge US law firm, every day I was challenged. On the one hand, this was so much fun in Hong Kong, you learn about different people, different cultures, seeing how lucky you are. And on the other hand, sure, it was a corporate job, and as a lawyer you should loved it, but I didn't. It was boring. And when you're a young lawyer, they don't give you interesting work, they just give you shit work, It's called discovery work. So they give you like a box of like documents dating back like 20 years before that, and you're supposed to find one document that would prove one single point for their case in court. And if we win that case, we're going to win $20 million for our client or something. But at the time I was thinking like, who gives a fuck? Like, I don't care if they win. You're 21. When you see what happened in Vietnam, and then you see what happened in Hong Kong, and then you're 25, you're young, you think, oh man, I have spent 5 years of studying and another year of training, 6 years for this, looking at stupid papers 20 years ago. I remember there was one time I sat in a warehouse, and it's like 3 months of just doing discovery work, like trying to find all these documents proving some points. And I had to go through these board of directors meetings, and the board of directors meeting would be meeting back in the 70s, having lunch for this and that. And I was thinking, do I give a fuck about what these people are eating in 1970 something? Why can't I just leave? I'm 25, I can survive. So the next day I just went into the human resources manager's room and said, her name was Vicky. I'm like, Vicky, I'm sorry, but I just don't think I can handle it. I've got to go to Hong Kong. And she totally understands. So she said, sure, Hoi, just give us 1 month. So a month later, I was off to Hong Kong. And I had a fantastic time. Thank God I called it quits. Yeah.
So, after those experiences, what brought you to the U.S.? What drew you towards?
Wow. What drew me to the U.S.? Marriage? Love? Yeah. Well, basically, so I went to Hong Kong, and I volunteered in Pam's office until 1997. So I finished law in 95. Worked for as a corporate lawyer for like nearly 2 years. 96, end of 96, I went to Hong Kong to work for Pam. But in 1997, the camps were closed. Hong Kong was returned to China, and all the refugees were gone because they were all pushed back to Vietnam, all resettled. So then there was a group called Lavas telling me that, look, there's a group of Vietnamese refugees in the Philippines, 2,500 of them. The Philippines, unlike other Southeast Asian nations, did not force the refugees back to Vietnam. They had one forced repatriation flight. The church got in, civil society groups got in, and basically Fidel Ramos at the time saying, look, we're not going to force Vietnamese refugees back to a place where they didn't want to go back, where they claim persecution. We will let them to stay here until a durable solution is found. So that was what he said. So Lavas then told me, Hoi, why don't you go there for 3 months and see what you can do? And I remember like, okay, fine. Hong Kong just closed its camps. I was on my way back to Australia. My ticket would sort of stop. Yeah, that's right. My ticket I would have to fly via Manila anyway before I go back to. So I'm gonna just stop by for 3 months and see what I do. Well, 3 months turned into 3 years, into 6 years, to 10 years, and it wasn't until last year that I got to close down our office in Manila. So yeah. But I came to answer the question. I came to the U.S. in 2005 because of love. Yeah.
Let's talk about your time in the Philippines and your work there.
Right.
Could you describe that?
God. In a nutshell, I learned how to be a lawyer in Hong Kong because I got to work with the most fantastic lawyers. I learned a lot from Pam. She passed away in 2002, and to this day I still miss her, and I wish that she was still alive so that she can tell great stories about Vietnamese refugees and whatnot. She's almost a Vietnamese herself. Without her, I wouldn't be doing what I would be doing up until now. And well, what can I talk about the Philippines? It's the place where I grew up. It's a place where I became a lawyer. Learning how to be a lawyer under Pam Baker's wings was different from being on your own and learning, first of all, how to work on cases on your own, and then later on realizing how the law is very limited in certain circumstances, and therefore you have to advocate for change, and therefore you have to work on the next level, which is changing policy, changing law. So for the first, from 97 to 1999, 2000, for the first 2 years, I did just follow the law, help people with their family reunion cases, made appeals regarding those cases, and that's it. But by the end of 1999, I realized that, well, okay, so 400, 500 people have gone. We have helped those people. Now, there are 2,000 left that will not have a way to go. They don't have any home to go to. And they were stateless. They were stateless because unlike refugees that just arrived that had been there for over 10 years. They arrived in 89, by 1999 it was 10 years already. They were denied refugee status by the Philippine government and UNHCR. A lot of them were denied unfairly because, sexual favors were made, bribery was common. If you didn't have $200, then you would not get refugee status from the officer, from the Philippine officer. So you see the blatant violation of human rights, and at the same time, there's no way out because Vietnam would not take them back. The US, Australia, Canada, and other resettlement countries would not take them because they were not refugees. They were not recognized as refugees under the CPA. The CPA is the Comprehensive Plan of Action that was designed in 1999 to, as I said before. So if I were just a lawyer, I would have to pack up and go home. There was nothing that I could do. But then, talking to people, and I guess growing up in the West, and it gives you that confidence that, there's something called advocacy. There's something called lobbying. And you do have at least the confidence. You don't know if you're going to get it there yet. In 1999, I didn't know, but I knew that if I wanted to somehow help these 2,000 people, I have to advocate for a change in law and policy. So I went home, and together with the Vietnamese community in Australia, we lobbied for a change in policy. And 2 years later, we got to meet up with the immigration minister at the time, Philip Ruddock. And 2 years later, we managed to convince the Australian government to give special humanitarian considerations to a small group of Vietnamese, stateless Vietnamese in the Philippines who had relatives in Australia, but who wouldn't otherwise be eligible for migration to Australia. So, in Australia we have a program called the SHP, Special Humanitarian Program, and they have only 2,000 visas a year or something. But if you could designate these people under that program, then they could go. So we successfully lobbied the Australian government to do that. So we got, the first case load involved about 20 families, a very small number, right? It's 50 people or something, who had either a parent or a child living in Australia. But because under the strict immigration law, they wouldn't be eligible to go. So we got that, and I remember the first time I walked out of the immigration minister's office, Philip Ruddock, and I was thinking, wow, at least we got 20 families out, and there were 2,000 people. So, but you felt vindicated. You felt like, wow, we can do it, huh? So one thing led to another. We lobbied him for the next year, and we got another 40 families out or something. And that, at the time, it was 2001, I think. So yeah, 2000 was when we lobbied, and 2001 when we got the cases processed. So at the time I was thinking, interesting. There are cases in Norway and cases in England and the US and Canada. They all have relatives. Maybe we can ask these countries to also change their policy and take those with relatives. Because there were out of those 2,000 people that got stuck behind, at least half of them got relatives elsewhere. I'm like, wow, maybe you can get 1,000 people out. But then I, as a volunteer, we were all paid $100 a month, so it's not a lot of money to, to go and lobby government. So what I did was I decided to do, to combine it. At the time, Pam Baker was still alive, 2001, and she said, Hoy, what you can do is you can try and get a scholarship, go to England and study, and use that as a base, and then lobby the government. I'm like, that sounds great. So then I applied for a scholarship. Luckily I got it, and then so I went off and did my master's in England. And I lobbied in my spare time, first of all, England and then Norway. And then when I finished my master's, I came here to the US. And that was also it's all ad hoc. It's not like we had this grand plan that we would resettle these people. on one of my trips of lobbying, I went to Geneva because at the time we were not very happy with the UNHCR. Okay, I was very pissed off at the UNHCR because in the Philippines I had an office, right? And what I wanted was I wanted the UNHCR to confirm in writing that there were 2,000 people that were left behind. They would not do that in writing. So it's like 2,000 people didn't exist to the UNHCR. And I think that's disgusting. Like okay, so you guys, these people came under your auspices, right? You supposed to provide oversight regarding the refugee program. You knew that corruption happened. You knew a lot about these violations of human rights. Yet, not only you didn't do anything about it, you close down the camp and you tell the world that the problem is done. So no one really knew that 2,000 people really existed in the Philippines in 2000. So all I wanted to them is to just put that in a letter, so that I can just go to this government and say there are 2,000 people, right? They would not do that because they said these people were not refugees and the UNHCR is supposed to be for refugees only, so therefore they are not responsible for these people. I'm saying, yeah, I know that you're not responsible, but can you please put it down in writing? Because if the UNHCR put it down in writing, it's better than Trinh saying that there are 2,000 people out there. They would not do that. I was really pissed off, and I remember I asked the head of UNHCR at the time. I said, so what if I don't agree with you? He said, well, if you don't agree with me, you go to Geneva. So you know what? I did go to Geneva. So I remember I finished my exams, my master's, and then a friend of mine and we went to Geneva to attend this conference on refugees, and with me determining to appeal against these stupid decisions by UNHCR. So of course I went to Geneva and kind of ring up people, and finally I got a letter from them, only saying so much that these 2,000 people existed until a durable solution is found, but they're not responsible. Fine, at least I got that letter. But when I went to Geneva, I managed to meet up with a very influential American, and his name is Shep Loyman, in refugee areas. He was instrumental in a lot of refugee programs relating to Vietnam and Vietnamese refugees in the 70s and 80s, but I didn't know, right? And so I met him in Geneva, and I told him about it, and he said, really? There are 2,000 people? I'm like, yeah, look at this letter from UNHCR. And at the time, he was like the director of JRS, or I can't remember, like quite a big NGO regarding refugee work at the time. He said, Hoi, what you should do is you should go to Washington, D.C., and I will introduce you to this person and that person, and then you can tell them about your case. I'm like, sure, I do that. So then, end of 2002, I finished my master's, I came here, and so Shep introduced me to this person, that person, so then that's it. So I started lobbying. So I was in Washington, D.C. on and off for 2 years, together with so many people that helped us out, so many NGOs, American NGOs, Vietnamese NGOs, personalities, the media, and especially a lot of the congressional staff helped us a lot. Loretta Sanchez's office, Zoe Lofgren's office, Chris Smith's office, the ones who are usually concerned about human rights in Vietnam. And then finally, I got to meet up with the legislative staff, the senior legislative staff of Senator Kennedy's office. And that was good. And then she suggested that, they can be written with McCain's office. And it's McCain was the Republican guy and Kennedy was the Democrat guy from the Senate. I'm like, yeah, if we get a joint letter. Yeah, so we did. And then one thing led to another. We met up with Kelly Ryan, who was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State at the time, and then John Dewey, who was the Assistant Secretary of State at the time, the head of PRM at the State Department, who was in charge of refugee programs. After so many meetings and negotiations and whatnot, they finally agreed to process the entire caseload in the Philippines and screen the population for resettlement in the U.S. So it's like rescreening. Before these Vietnamese were screened by the Philippine government under the auspices of the UNHCR, never screened by the resettlement countries. This time it's like the US would go in using its own refugee test to screen these 2,000 people. And guess what? It's like we got 99.7% success rate. So we got like 1,600 people that passed the test. So 2005, they passed the test, so they got resettled here. We got some people left, about 400 people left, 500, about 500 left. And then, so we lobbied, during this time, we also lobbied Norway. So Norway also changed its law and allowed about 200 people to resettle there, and then the rest were resettled in Canada over the past 3 years. So now we have only one refugee case left in the Philippines. So that's the story.
Wow. Could you tell me your experience working with the Vietnamese community here in the States?
I haven't really worked with the Vietnamese community here in the States. In Australia, the community is, they have a structure in Australia. It's like, you have a state community and people get voted in, and then they have a federal level. So then, it's like every 2 years or 4 years. So there's a structure. Over here, there's no federal structure of the Vietnamese community. It's not like every state's got its own representative and then every year they send people to the federal level. It's like it's all over the place. And because I'm not originally from the States, I didn't really work with the Vietnamese community. I worked with personalities, like community leaders, who helped with the advocacy efforts. So I haven't really worked with the Vietnamese community, capital letters, Vietnamese community. I'd rather work with the Vietnamese community like the small letters. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, so like I work with people like, the people in the media, people who were very sympathetic to refugees, some congressmen who were interested or who had vested interest in the Vietnamese community, like Zoe Lofgren, Loretta Sanchez, and so on, or An Nam Lao, like a community leader, a refugee advocate, and a lot with the American refugee community, American NGOs, and you're talking about like Jesuit Refugee Service, you talk about CWS, or IRS, not IRS, the LIRS, Lutheran Immigration Refugee Service. So those people, but not the Vietnamese community per se.
So what kind of organizations do you work with now, or a part of?
Now, I work with International Lifeline Fund, and that's an NGO founded by a good friend of mine, and we provide clean water and fuel efficient technologies to refugees and displaced persons in Africa and Haiti. So I work there as a director of program development, but I also in 2005 together with some friends set up VOICE. VOICE stands for Vietnamese Overseas Initiative for Conscience Empowerment. It's wordy, but it's VOICE, and we set up to find a durable solutions for refugees, especially remaining refugees in Southeast Asia. So right now we finished with the Philippine caseload. I mean, 2005 we had 500 people left over, and we found a durable solution for almost all except one case. We're still working on that case, and now we have about 40 refugees in Cambodia and about 60 of them in Thailand that we're still working on. the refugees in Cambodia have been there for about, they're not boat people, they've been there for on and off for about, not on and off, on a, it's between 5 to 10 years. And we found sponsors for them in Canada, so we're processing the papers right now. We also have to find extra sponsors because the law has just been tightened up. And we haven't been so successful with the Thailand cases, but we're still working on. So that's under the banner of Voice. And also, Voice is also trying to help out with some of the cases regarding dissidents in Vietnam. So that's what we do.
Where can I find out more about your organization?
You go on the website, it's vietnamvoice.org, Vietnam Voice, voic.org. Or you can just type in my name, Hoi Trinh, refugee. There'll be lots of articles on the work that we've been doing over the past, I don't know, 15 years? Yeah, since 1992. Wow, no, not 15, 18 years. Shit. Yeah, long time, huh?
So can I find a lot of these things on your blog? Is that right?
No, I mean, my blog, I write about everything, man. I don't just write about refugees. For my blog, I write about whatever. I can write whatever. And refugee, just something that I write, but I don't write about refugees all the time. Come on, there are other stuff in life than just refugees, you know? Yeah.
You travel quite often. How do you balance family and your career?
With difficulties. That's why I haven't been so successful. Look, God, how do I balance it? I don't know. I think it's a question I ask myself all the time. I don't know. You know, I haven't been so successful at it, and I guess my traveling and my wandering mind has got something to do with the breakup. Maybe, who knows? But yeah, it's something I have to, you know, reconsider. I have absolutely no idea how to answer that question because I think it is on a day-to-day basis. It's not like something that you can make a conscious choice. It's like I would choose this or that. Yeah, I think it's a dilemma, personally speaking, because I don't have any kid now, right? But when I have a kid out, I know it's both of them are so important. You know, the sense of conviction, the sense of justice, and how you have to make a change. You know, Gandhi used to say, right? You know, you have to. If you want to change something, then you have to change yourself first. So if you want to change the world, change yourself first. You have to start doing it yourself. So it's a very strong conviction on my part, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun seeing how you can contribute and make a change in someone's life and make it better. Sounds really corny, but sort of true. I think everyone sort of strives to do that. But then, on the other hand, sort of as you grow up and grow old, you also want to have a family and all that. So, I know I'm trying to find it myself. I'm trying to find the balance. I hope I can find it. Yeah.
What advice would you give to young Vietnamese people regarding life and if they want to become a lawyer such as like yourself?
Advice? Jeez, I don't even know what I'm doing. Advice? You know what? Follow your dream, man. It sounds so corny. Everyone says that, you know, but yeah, follow your dream, and for sure there'll be friction if you follow your dream because your dream may not be your parents' dream. For sure, you will not feel that confidence when you first started because I remember when I was 25 when I decided to call it quits. and go out and just do my own things. I didn't have that confidence as I do now, right? I didn't know what I was doing. I had like $500 when I went to Hong Kong, but I never looked back since then. Or I looked back and I thought, wow, thank God I left. But believe in yourself. I think, instinctively speaking, all of us would not let ourselves go down the drain, so to speak. We will survive somehow. I don't know how, but you will pick yourself up when you're in a tight spot. And if you have your dream there, at least you can still live your dream. Sure, I'm in a tight spot, but my dream is still there. And have some believe more in yourself and follow your dream, whatever your dream might be. If you want to be a great dancer, go for it. Even if your parents don't like it, well, they come around. When I first did these refugee things, right? My parents weren't exactly thrilled about it, because I think all Vietnamese parents, they lack so much security and stability. So when it was our turn, they want to give us that, but it's the least thing we wanted, because we always had stability and security. So we didn't want that. And so they wouldn't like it at first, and you will have friction. You will argue, you may not talk to each other for a few months, but they will come around. I mean, once you prove to them that you can survive, and you can survive well, and in that process you can help others, they will come around and they'll be proud of you. So don't worry.
Is there anything else that you wanted to share about your life? I believe I skipped over the question about maybe the organization called One Vietnam. Could you elaborate on what that is and how you're involved?
No, as in with voice. No, I've only been involved with voice, not One Vietnam. I don't know what One Vietnam is.
Neither do I.
I've only been involved with voice. I guess having done a bit of advocacy work and traveled a bit and learned a bit about life. I think the next step is Vietnam, how to make it a better place, how to bring democracy and freedom to Vietnam, how to help the young and the educated in Vietnam to the world. Right now, Vietnam is not exactly the freest nation on earth. It's still a one-party state. Dissidents are still being detained, interrogated, beaten. So I think as a community, I think that is the goal, how to make Vietnam to a better place. But it's tough, it's not easy, because our parents' generation's idea of communism and how to get rid of it is different from our own idea of what communism is and how to get rid of it. I mean, we still want to get rid of it, but we disagree on methods. And then also Vietnamese in Vietnam, I mean, they also have their own ideas of what communism means. So being more involved, what my message would be for kids that were born overseas in Vietnam, I mean in the States or Australia or Canada or wherever, to be more involved in community work. It's like what Kennedy used to say, don't ask what your country has done for you. So don't ask what your community has done for you, ask what you have done for your community. And try to understand also our parents, because they've gone through a lot, and it might be difficult to sort of understand them sometimes. Sort of, given what they've gone through, that's pretty much you can ask of them. You can't ask for more. A lot of people, I find that not that involved. Um, I guess in America it's a bit different from Australia in that sense too. That community involvement or social activism is not exactly really high on the agenda. It's more corporate and commercialism and capitalism is more on the rise here. And maybe there's a difference between Australia and the US, but I hope that given our background, we can contribute more to the American culture as well as to Vietnam by being fully appreciative of both cultures. Sure, when you grow up, you just want to be assimilated. You don't want to be seen as different, or you have a funny accent, or you don't look as big and muscular and as the white guys. But be confident in who you are, and there are a lot of things that will make you happy, and one of those things was to be productive and helpful to others. If you do that, then you'll be happy yourself. I find that we try too hard to please ourselves by doing stupid work like corporate work, because ultimately I don't think that's what people really, really want to do. That's just for the money. And it sounds so cliche, but money doesn't really make you happy, because for us, we all spend our money. It doesn't matter how much we make, it's all disposable income. At the end of the day, we still end up with $0 balance in the bank account. So you might as well end up with a 0 bank balance account, but you have fun. So that's it. Be more involved, be positive, and be confident that we have a lot to offer to the world as well, and not what the world has got to offer to us. That's all.
To touch up on that, have you ever been back to Vietnam?
Yeah, many times. I first went back to Vietnam in 1996 to, at the time the refugees were forced back to Vietnam and from Hong Kong, and there were reports of them being discriminated against, the returnees. So I went back on one of those trips. That was my first trip. And then after that, I went back many times to interview people. I used to work as a reporter. Well, I still work as a reporter for a couple of Vietnamese American productions. So I would interview singers and songwriters and all that. So I've been back to Vietnam a lot. And then in 2007, I went back to Vietnam for a year to work as a lawyer for a law firm. No, not a law firm, a consultancy firm in Saigon. And then I got kicked out of Vietnam in 2009. So yes.
Could you explain more about being kicked out of Vietnam?
Oh, it's not like because it's not like because I was a criminal or something. But maybe in their eyes I was. Just because of my human rights work, my refugee work in the Philippines, and then my knowing too much about laws, and I guess having a bit of a name in the community, not so pro-communist. And then when I was in Vietnam, I also got in touch with quite a few lawyers who were progressive at the time, and now they're in prison, like Lê Công Định and Lê Quốc Quân and all that. So the government, for the first 6 months, nothing happened, but the last 6 months, they interrogated me like regularly, like incessantly. And then in the end, they did not extend my visa. So at first, they denied me permits to be an MC. They didn't so they gave me a permit to be a lawyer, but not as an MC. And then later on, they denied me an extension of visa. So they asked me to leave Vietnam because even though I didn't do anything yet, in their eyes, I might be a bad influence in the society, because of certain views I have. So yeah,
think you touched on it a little bit, but what can I or another young Vietnamese American do in their community to help the motherland? Or
First of all, go back to Vietnam. My advice would be, you have to understand the subject matter first. If you want to help Vietnam, go back to Vietnam first. There are many ways of helping Vietnam. A lot of, okay, not a lot. There are many Vietnamese Americans, Australians who are there working as corporate lawyers and bankers and consultants and whatnot. But not enough people to go back there and try and work for civil society, set up institutions, set up civil NGOs. It's tough, but it's not impossible. If you go in there and you just do poverty reduction, chances are that's going to be okay. But a lot of kids don't have that connection yet, huh? A lot of kids growing up in Australia, the States, they don't have that connection yet. So in order for you to feel strongly about something, or you want to work towards something, you have to feel strongly about it. You have to have that personal connection. The only reason why I was sort of so attached to the refugees of the Philippines was because I lived there. I lived there for so long. I knew so many people. They became sort of like part of my family. So couldn't really, it wasn't work anymore. It was life. It was part of my life. So I wasn't just a lawyer. I was more like one of them, speak on their behalf, except that I had a passport and I can speak a bit of English, so I can be their voice, and they were voiceless. So in order for you, I think, to really want to help Vietnam in whatever way that you want, whether to make it a freer society or a better place economically, commercially, or politically even, go back to Vietnam first and then find your way there. There are many ways. I mean, Vietnam is not that bad. I mean, like I'm a bit of an exception, I think my reputation got a bit ahead of me, so it's not good. But if you go back there and you're not some well-known names, and you just on the ground and you're doing your own things, that is a part of the change that we need.
I don't have any particular questions right now. Do you have anything else you'd like to share?
No, I'm just sorry that you guys have just listened to me for so long. I'm just sorry, and hopefully you also have your own story to tell one day, and my story is just a bit different because I'm not exactly from America, although I live here now and I'm applying for citizenship. But yeah, create your own story. That's all.